Once upon a time, there was a poor woman who was a widow and lived with her son. He didn't work because he was very lazy, so they barely had any money. "Do we have anything to eat? I'm hungry," he always asked. As the days went by, they became poorer and poorer until they reached the point where they had to sell the only cow they owned, called Milk White, because they could no longer feed her. Joan's mother asked him to go to the nearest fair to sell the cow and get some change. That way, they would have some money to buy food. This woman was a very hard-working person, but because of her son's laziness, their situation only got worse. Joan spent his days lying down, doing nothing to help. The mother, worried, often cried in secret, thinking about how they would survive. The little money they had ran out quickly, and they often didn't know if they would have anything to eat the next day. The milk-white cow was the only thing of value they still owned. A day came when Joan's mother realized that they had no choice but to sell the cow. With a heavy heart, she explained to Joan the importance of this task. "My son, go to the market and sell the cow. Use the money to buy food. We need this to survive." She hoped that Joan understood the seriousness of the situation and made the best deal possible. So, Joan took the cow and began his journey to the fair. On the way, he thought about the responsibility he had in his hands. He knew that the money from selling the cow was their last hope. Upon arriving at the fair, he would have to negotiate well to get a good price for Milk White. And so, with the weight of responsibility, Joan continued on his way, hoping to bring back the necessary sustenance for himself and his mother. On the way to the fair, Joan met a very strange man. When the man saw the cow, he said to John, "Hello, my boy. If you give me this cow, I will give you many valuable things." Joan was very happy and curious. The man then took 5 beans out of his pocket and said, "These are magic beans." Joan couldn't believe the man, thinking it was a joke. But the man continued to insist. "Young man, you seem smart. Take these magic beans. You won't regret it. Trust me." The old man seemed so sure of his words that Joan began to believe him. He thought that maybe the beans really were magical and could bring something good to him and his mother. So, John decided to trust the man. He handed over the cow, his only source of sustenance, to the stranger. In return, he received the 5 magic beans. Joan was very excited about the idea of having something magical in his hands. Although he had a little doubt, the man's promise made him believe that these beans could change his luck. With the beans in his pocket, Joan returned home, eager to tell his mother about the encounter and the magic beans. He didn't know what to expect, but he hoped this exchange would be the start of something incredible. After all, the old man seemed so convinced that those beans were really special. Happy with the exchange he had made, Joan ran home. "Mommy, look what I got!" he shouted, full of enthusiasm. His mother, seeing Joan so excited, thought that he had sold the cow for good money. However, when Joan showed the magic beans, his mother's expression changed completely. She was very angry. "What did you do, John?" she exclaimed, taking the beans from his hand. "You traded our only cow for these beans? How are we going to survive now?" In anger and despair, Joan's mother threw the beans into the garden and looked at him, disappointed. "You will be grounded in your room," she said sternly. "No dinner. I can't believe you did that." With that, she sent Joan to the bedroom, closing the door behind him. John was sad and regretful. He thought he was bringing home something special, but now, seeing his mother's reaction, he felt foolish and guilty. Lying in bed, he looked out the window at the garden, where the beans had been thrown, not knowing what would happen next. In the morning, when John looked out the window, he couldn't believe what he saw. A huge beanstalk was rapidly growing towards the sky. It was neither an ordinary tree nor a giant flower. It was a magic beanstalk. It stretched upward, higher than anything John had ever seen. Curious and excited, Joan decided to explore. He jumped out of the window and began climbing the beanstalk, using the leaves and vines as if they were steps on a ladder. The climb seemed endless, but Joan was determined to find out where the beanstalk would take him. After a long time of climbing, Joan finally reached the top. He found a very strange place, where everything was gigantic. The ground was covered in huge flowers, and the trees were so tall that they seemed to touch the sky. Looking around, Juon saw a stone path that led to a huge house at the end. Juon was amazed and a little apprehensive. Who could live in such a big house? Determined to find out, he began walking along the stone path, feeling small and insignificant in the middle of that giant world. Every step he took increased his curiosity and his desire to explore more of that fantastic place he had found at the top of the magical beanstalk. Juon arrived at the door of the giant house and knocked. A giant woman replied, "Do you have anything to eat? I'm hungry." Juon, nervous, replied that yes, there was food, but that she needed to leave before her husband returned, as he liked to eat children. The worried woman invited Juon to come in, but warned him about the danger. Afraid but hungry, Juon accepted the invitation and sat down at the table to eat. As he devoured the food, he heard a voice outside humming an ominous song. It was the husband of the giant woman, who threatened to eat any child he found. Scared, the giant woman asked Juon to hide inside the oven. Juon, without hesitation, followed his instructions, looking for a safe hiding place to avoid the terrible fate that awaited him if he were discovered. The giant entered the kitchen and began sniffing, saying, "I smell a child. Is there one here, dear?" The woman quickly replied, "You must be confusing it with the smell of the food I prepared for the cats." After having dinner, the giant began to count his gold coins. Tired, he ended up falling asleep. John, seeing his opportunity, came out of the oven, took the giant's bag of gold coins and threw it under the beanstalk. Then he started going down the beanstalk. When he arrived at the bottom, Juon retrieved the bag of coins and ran into the house. Upon seeing the gold coins, his mother was ecstatic. With that money, they would no longer be poor and would never go hungry again. From that day on, Juon and his mother's lives changed completely. They had enough to live comfortably without worries about money or food. Juon's adventure in the world of giants had been risky, but it had brought them a new and prosperous life. After some time, all the gold that Juon and his mother had ran out. With no other option, Juon decided to climb the beanstalk again and visit the giant's house in search of more riches. When he got there, the giant's wife became suspicious. "Last time you were here, we lost a bag of gold," she said, looking at John suspiciously. Even so, she still felt sorry for the young man and invited him in. A short time later, the giant returned, humming his haunting song, "Fee, fee, fo, fum, I smell children's blood. Whether he is alive or dead, I will grind the bones to make my bread." Hearing this, John quickly hid in the oven once again, fearing for his fate if he were discovered by the terrible giant. After dinner, the giant asked his wife to bring the chicken. When she brought it, the giant ordered the hen to lay an egg. To Juon's surprise, the hen laid a golden egg. After the giant went to his room to rest, Juon came out of the oven and stole the chicken, throwing it under the beanstalk. With the goose that laid golden eggs, John and his mother were rich again. But time passed, and once again Juon felt the urge to try his luck. He began to climb the beanstalk towards the giant's house. Upon entering the house, this time he didn't see the woman and decided to hide inside a large pot. Sometime later, the giant returned home, humming his haunting melody. The giant woman this time no longer wanted to protect the boy. "If there is a child in this house, he must be hiding inside the oven," she said to the giant, indicating the place where John had previously hidden. But, to everyone's surprise, Juon was hiding inside the pan, not the oven. Determined to find the boy, the giant and his wife searched the entire house, but were unable to find him. After dinner, the giant placed a golden harp on the table and ordered his wife to play it. Enchanted by the soft melodies of the harp, the woman fell asleep, followed by the giant. The music had a calming effect on them, causing them to fall asleep quickly. At that moment, Juon wanted more than anything to have that harp for himself. Determined, he climbed the giant's leg and jumped onto the table where the harp lay. But something unexpected happened. The harp started to scream. Frightened, Juon grabbed the harp and jumped off the table with it on his back, which immediately woke up the giant. The giant, furious, began to run after Juon. He hurriedly began to descend the beanstalk as quickly as he could, but the giant continued to pursue him relentlessly. Upon arriving home, Juon shouted to his mother, "Mom, quickly, Bring the axe. The two began frantically cutting down the beanstalk, knowing it was the only way to stop the giant and protect their lives. Finally, the beanstalk and the giant fell to the ground, causing a deafening crash. John and his mother were safe from the giant. "I can't believe it, we're saved!" Jerome exclaimed, relieved. They were, in fact, out of danger, but John felt deep regret for all his actions. He almost lost his life because of his greed. So John made a solemn promise to his mother. He would never steal anything from anyone again, and he would be an honest worker. From that day on, they lived comfortably. Despite having the goose that laid the golden eggs to help, Jerome never stopped working. He learned that true value comes from hard work and honesty, not greed and the pursuit of easy riches.